He's doing this, and I know he would never say these things himself, but he says that out of love, because he knows convincingly how important this information is, and he sacrifices all of the quote, good things in life to be a faithful follower of Lord Jesus. And I want to charge all of my listeners to go to Radio Liberty, become a regular listener like I am, to look at his materials, get the materials they have for sale, and support this brother in the Lord who is faithfully serving and trying to serve all of us in the family of God as well. And I know you would never toot your horn like that, Dr. Monteith, but I tell you, you're a role model for me and for those of us folks who have come in your wake behind you. I don't know how you have the energy and how you've been so faithful for 2 decades of presenting this information. I know sometimes the most criticism we get of this information are from fellow believers in the Lord. They like to call us conspiracy theorists. They like to say all sorts of things about us. And that information has been whispered in their ear from the very people who we try to expose, that have told these things to them. So I just want to thank you for that, and publicly thank you for your service, and tell my listeners that if you believe anything what you hear on Future Quake, if you're intrigued by it, Dr. Monteith has been fighting the good fight well before me, and his show will have much more information to support what's going on. I just want to thank you again for that.
Well, God bless, and I appreciate that, and I'm just so glad to know that you and others are coming along and we're going to pick up the reins when I'm not here.
Well,
hopefully we'll be around for a while, though.
If the Lord does tarry, for all of the many, many thousands and thousands of very loyal and devoted followers you have, your contribution, if the Lord tarries for a long period of time, won't be fully understood for many, many decades from now, when people will fully understand and come across your materials and have their eyes open, maybe many years after we're both gone. I want to clarify something on this conference that you have coming up. It sounds very, very intriguing. I know you've had an annual conference, but is there a web link or anywhere where people can find out more about when it is, where it is, how much it costs to attend, that kind of thing?
Well, basically it's going to be in the North Shore of Monterey Bay at the Abdallah Seascape Golf Course. They can go to our website at radioliberty.com. It should be posted there. I hope it is. But
okay. If
not, they can call our 800 number, and I know the girls at our exchange, 800-544-8927 or 800-5-HIV-WAR. And, of course, it's $49 for the a day. Of course, they get a free lunch out of it. And we're bringing in speakers from Dr. Blaylock from the East, and he's going to be talking on medical issues. We'll have Joanna Michelson, who is a spirit medium, and we'll have Pat Wood talking on finance, the things people really need to know.
Well, now clarify, Miss Michelson, you said she's a spirit medium. You mean she's a former...
She was a spirit medium.
Okay.
She was basically recruited by a Mexican health healer, and Joanna was there for 400 of these surgical procedures, these spiritual procedures where the woman would reach into a man's brain and pull out the tumor, and reach into the abdomen and pull out the tumor. And these were cases that had been given up by ordinary medicine.
Now, didn't she write the book, was it The Beautiful Side of Evil?
Beautiful Evil, yeah. She wrote this back about 1982, after she had become a Christian and realized that this whole thing was a manifestation of the demonic world, and this was all demonic. But and she has a wonderful, wonderful testimony. I've heard Joanna speak many times. We've interviewed her, but I always marvel at it. It's a privilege to have her come and of course, give a talk for us. But certainly she was able to contact. She had the curse of being able to contact the other dimension. And of course, this faith healer recognized this in her, and of course that's why she was recruited, and she was supposed to take over the ministry. But eventually, she realized, of course, that this was coming from the other dimension. She renounced it, and she's been a great champion warrior for the Lord ever since then. So,
any other speakers? Any other notable ones?
Well, of course, Dr. Blaylock is internationally known as an expert on medical issues. Pat, we're only going to have 5 speakers, myself, Michael Shaw, who talks on the environmental movement, Joanna Michelson, Dr. Blaylock and, of course, Pat Wood, we have found that the best thing to do is not to have too many speakers, so that they can, instead of speaking 40 minutes or an hour, they can speak an hour and a half, so that they can get their information out. This is one of the problems going to conferences, is they try to squeeze in too many speakers. And I suddenly began to realize after doing this for a few years, and especially with some counseling from my wife, that this was not the way to go. Fewer speakers, but better speakers with lots of time. And so this is what we did last year when we had Dr. Garth Nicholson, who's certainly one of the world's leading scientists, and he gave a talk. And of course we had Carol Matriciana. We had a speaker on finances who was a regular a participant in our radio programs named Ron Brown, and then, of course, the other two. And it was a great program, and I think people enjoyed it more. And so that's what we're going to be doing this year. It's October the 26th. If anybody's interested, they can contact us through our exchange, and we can put them in touch with the hotels there. But it's people come, and they don't want to leave at the end of the day, but we usually have to pack up and get on home. But it's a great way to meet people from across the country. It's a great way to, of course, obtain information, because we have all of the things we've made. And, of course, we make a lot of 4-tape and CD sets and DVDs. And this is how we really, of course, finance in large part our ministry. A mail-order business. I never thought I'd give up orthopedic surgery for a mail-order business, but this is how we finance our radio ministry, and what a privilege it is to be able to speak to people.
And this is a one-day. This is a one-day event.
Pardon?
This is a one-day event.
It's just a one-day event. Yes.
Okay, one-day event. I hope you may have a chair for a Dr. Future there. That sounds pretty tempting for me.
Okay, we'd love to have you.
I would have to just put up with that horrible locale there and the horrible environment in the Santa Cruz area.
One of the most beautiful areas in the world is the Monterey Bay area. I've lived throughout the world. I lived in Europe. We've lived in Africa. We've traveled to the South Pacific, but nothing compares with where we live, and I always come back. I feel very blessed to live here.
Well, I want to move on in our discussion a little bit. Why do you think people prefer not to explore these troubling facts that you've shared, which they're there? If you reach now with the internet, they're really within reach now. Why don't they explore some of these troubling facts that you have already shown with us today, just in the few minutes we've been on, but regularly on your show, in greater detail? And why do people choose to believe what the media and politicians say instead?
I think it's much more comfortable to believe. I think that there is a element of spiritual blindness out there. And the only way that people are going to be able to begin to change their paradigm of their worldview is to realize that they have a very serious problem that's going to affect them, and this is coming to pass at the present time. Well, right now, of course, we're seeing the implosion of the American economy. We're seeing the destruction of the American dollar, and of course all of the things that the Federal Reserve System and the government are doing to try to counter the current economic contraction are simply effectively destroying the value of our currency. What the average American doesn't understand is what Alan Greenspan said in his book, The Age of Turbulence, quoting Lenin, who said, "There is no better way to destroy a nation than to debauch its currency. And not one person in a million will understand what's happening." And that's just what's going on in America today. That we're in the process of destroying the value of our currency, and by so doing we'll destroy the pensions of the average American. We'll destroy the insurance, the value of the insurance policy. We'll destroy the value of their life savings, their CDs, their annuities, anything that they have that's denominated in dollars is going to be destroyed in the coming years. We're going into a very, very severe depression. The plan is to lower the living standards of the American people. The plan is laid out in the Earth Charter, in the Global Biodiversity Assessment, which we have available through Radio Liberty. These are put out by people on the other side, some of the richest and most powerful and evil people in the world, and they openly talk about the transfer of our wealth to other nations, and that's why they're transferring our manufacturing to other nations, to China, to Thailand, to Malaysia, to Mexico. We're transferring our major manufacturing elsewhere to raise the living standards of the people there and impoverish the American people. And one of the great problems we have really is affluence. And only when people begin to see everything they've worked for their whole life, and the things that they put their faith and their security in, being destroyed. At that point, hopefully, they're going to begin to ask questions. Why is this happening? Why won't the government stop it? And the government isn't going to stop it. And they're doing everything they can to promote it, because our congressmen, we have some of the finest congressmen money could buy back there in Washington, D.C., and they do what they are told to do by the people who give them millions of dollars to run for re-election. And, of course, why is Obama able to raise $22 million in a month, and McCain, a similar amount? And, I mean, who's putting up all of this money for our politicians? It's all for the show. It's all showbiz. There's not a dime's worth of difference between the policies of the Republicans and the Democrats. They're both globalists. They're all environmentalists. You're going to use the environmental movement to strip us of our freedom, because there's no problem in the environmental movement that a new government program won't be the solution. And what people don't understand is every time you pass a new law, you take away a little freedom. The ultimate goal is to take away all freedom, to enslave and impoverish our people. And people don't understand. We're moving towards a police dictatorship in America in the name of fighting terrorism, and the wicked man who's over there in a cave in Pakistan, Osama bin Laden, who incidentally has been dead for several years. I mean, Mrs. Bhutto, anybody who doubts this, can go up on the internet and type in Mrs. Bhutto.
Right.
And of course, she interviewed with Gordon Frost.
Right,
and
she said that.
Yeah, and she told him that bin Laden had been dead for several years, and of course, very, very soon, Mrs. Bhutto was dead, because that's the last thing they want to get out for the American people.
Dr. Monteith, it's interesting you mentioned about our politicians, and that's something that we always end up back at with different guests we have on our show, is that this whole thing is a facade about the two political parties and different worldviews and things. We've not had, if you've noticed, my co-host, Tom Bionic's not been with us in the interview, and he's a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, and he's back in your neck of the woods literally right now. He surprised and called me yesterday from the outside of the gate of Bohemian Grove. And
really?
He dropped there and got roughed up a little bit by some of the security there. But the reports that I saw was that both John McCain and Obama were heading there now sometime during the period of time that they're meeting at Bohemian Grove. I saw some relatively reliable reports on that. I can't verify it myself. But the fact these groups exist is a reality. It's not a rumor. It's not just some kind of internet story that's passed around. The documents are there to read if people just take the time and maybe take a few minutes away from going to the mall or watching their mindless television program that we've all been programmed underneath to be mindless and ignore these things and go read a little bit. You'll find out these things are legitimate, and it'll totally change your worldview about things. What do you think from the information that you've gotten recently, because really you're at the cutting edge of finding information with the guests that you have on putting all the pieces together and their latest movements? What is some of the information you've had in recent times that you think my listeners would find most shocking, particularly the Christian audience we have that maybe is not familiar with a lot of this information? What have you heard lately that just shows that this movement is accelerated and moving forward very quickly?
Well, certainly I think one of the very interesting things is the fact that the media is controlled. You're not going to get the truth. I don't know how many of your listeners know that about a week and a half ago, the House of Representatives voted by an overwhelming majority to impeach President Bush. And they've started their hearings, or they had the hearings started this week for the impeachment of the President of the United States, and not a word in the media about it. They control the media. They control what people think. Mm-hmm. In a similar manner, of course, the tremendous atrocities by the Chinese communists. We hear about the atrocity committed by some one of the Bosnian leaders, or maybe it was a Serbian leader, but it killed a few thousand people, and that's a terrible thing. The Chinese communists starved to death between 30 and 44 million people between 58 and 62, and not a word in the media, the United States. And certainly no call for bringing the people responsible for that before the bar of justice. I mean, we take Nazi criminals, they're living in the United States. Perhaps they were a guard in a Nazi prison camp, and we send them back. and make a big issue out of that. And then, of course, we do everything we can to reward the communists in China, because we're building up communist China. And, of course, I fear that we're doing this in preparation for the coming Third World War. First World War was fought to bring about a world government, the League of Nations, and when it failed, we had to have a Second World War, and we had a Second World War to create the United Nations, but it still hasn't created a world government. That's why the Third World War is coming.